Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of A Mic on the Podium with me, Michael Seal. Young conductors, conductors just starting out, and those who are studying conducting. You may want to know that I have a whole set of podcast interviews that you may find very interesting. This new series includes interviews with the Chief Executive of a major British orchestra, the Chief Executive of a major agency, the leader of a major UK orchestra, plus other orchestral musicians, including next month my interview with Fergus McWilliam, horn player with the Berlin Philharmonic. If you want to hear their views on what it takes to become a great conductor, you can when you subscribe for just £5 a month over on patreon.com/A Mic on the Podium. For this small amount each month, you get these interviews plus much more. Details are in the show notes below. Today, I conduct a conversation with an Italian conductor who won the 1985 Toscanini Conductors competition and has had a truly international career ever since. He's probably best known for his 2 stints as music director of Welsh National Opera, where he is now Conductor Laureate. It's a real pleasure to welcome Carlo Rizzi. Carlo, lovely to talk to you today. How are you?
Hi, I'm very fine. I'm here in Italy, in my house, relaxing actually.
Well, I suppose we've all been doing a lot of relaxing recently. You were telling me that most things have been cancelled now through until Christmas. Have you worked at all since lockdown?
Well, I had the dubious honor in March to conduct the last performance of Welsh National Opera before everything went into lockdown. And since then, actually, the vast majority of my work should have been in America. At the Met first, then in Chicago. Between that, I should have gone to La Scala, but that was, the height of COVID. And now, in this moment, I actually should be at the Met again. And everything has been obviously cancelled. Well, in a way, considering that is America, maybe it's better not to be there because, as you know, the infection there is very high. I've been able to do a couple of things when Italy came out from the first lockdown around June, July. I conducted actually one of the first opera performances in Italy, in Florence. We did it in concert form, was Ballet Maschera, and it was great. It was really great. I didn't think, honestly, after nearly 40 years of career, that it would have been so enjoyable to start to conduct again. And the same thing was shared also with the orchestra, with the chorus. They really, really wanted to do it. And with the public, I have to say. The regulation in Italy allowed about 400, 500 people in what would have been a 2,000-seat capacity. And it was great, but of course it's not like it is normal.
No. Well, at least there seems to be an appetite for it growing over the months, and so as many people who are allowed to go will go. And I think that as numbers grow of the amount of audience allowed, I think we'll have no problem filling those seats because I think people are hungry for it. I think they really
exactly.
You said you've had over a 40-year career. How did it start? When did music first come into your life? You're born and raised in Milan, I think.
Yes, I was born and raised in Milan. I first of 3 children. My parents were not musical. My father was a chemist. My mother was an accountant. And I was, as I say, the first one. And since quite early, they started to, before elementary school, in kindergarten, there was some of these teachers that were giving some lesson on piano. And, well, evidently, it's funny because I don't remember anything of this. All this I know through my parents that told me. And they decided to send me to this because I was very introverted and they thought that this could wake me up to the world. And actually did, because I started to play piano, and it was clear that, I liked it, and I had some qualities. I was not Mozart, but I just liked it, and they went on and on. And since then, the only thing that I remember when I was about 10, 11, 12, that was the moment where in Italy at the time, in the education system, you would have to decide if you were going to do music, if you wanted to go to the conservatorio or doing it in another way. Now, going to the conservatorio at the time meant that what for us was the medium school, that here in the UK would have been the first 3 years of secondary school, would have been done also in the conservatorio. And my parents were not happy about this because, for them, music was like a alien career. So they said, if you want to do music, great, but you do it as something plus after school. So you do school and then you do the rest. And actually, that years, I thank them for this because I have a much more broader cultural bringing ahead that if I would have gone only at the conservatory. This, of course, is the way that it was at the time in Italy. Now it's maybe different. And so I had these two parallel schools. The normal school, I did a classic studies, Latin, Greek, history, philosophy, blah, blah, blah. And then I started, I was studying piano. Then I started to study oboe a little bit. Then composition, then conducting. And this went on until when I graduated in piano, composition, and then conducting when I was, don't remember, I think in 19, 20, 21, something like that. I did it in 3 years. And then, first I won some small competition as a pianist, and I played a lot of chamber music that I really loved. Also with my brother, that is actually conservationist. And then I got drawn more into conducting. And so then I started to do also there some competitions. And but the funny thing was that when I graduated, suddenly I discovered that I didn't know anything at all about conducting because no, I tell you how it happened. As I say, I was quite good at the piano, and I started. I've been asked to work at La Scala as a repetiteur with Mazel. Now Mazel, great conductor. Some people like that, some people don't. What I was admiring of him was the incredible technical skills that he had. And the baton, the hearing, I mean, it was fantastic the way that he was rehearsing with the orchestra. But the funny thing is that I discovered that watching what he was doing with the orchestra, either he was wrong or I was wrong in what I've been told to do. I decided quite clearly that I was the wrong one.
Yes.
And so, chances are. And so I started to find a way to study again. So I had the possibility in Italy. There was a Russian conductor that is not very well known, but actually was a very, very good teacher, Vladimir Delman. He escaped the Russian communist regime, and he had quite a good career in Italy. And so he was doing a course actually about conducting opera. And so I went to study with him, and we were 20, 25 in this course. And it was hard. It was really hard because he, he was like, the old patriarch. And there was, so his way of teaching, I'm not talking musically, but I'm talking actually psychologically, was like the old grandfather that was telling the young guy, you are wrong.
Yes.
So, but I learned really, really a lot from him.
What was he teaching you? Was it an overall approach, a holistic approach to learning the opera scores as well as stick technique, or was he mainly talking?
Let me tell you the first lesson. The first lesson was actually very, very interesting. So there was this 24, 25 people. We had an admission exam. We went in front of the orchestra conductor, something. So you already had an idea. So here we are, the first lesson. 24 people. Buongiorno, buongiorno. Say, so who is coming out today? By the way, the piece was the Preludio of Aida. Sorry, not the Preludio, after the Preludio, when the music started with Ramfis and Radames. And it was with two pianos. There was no orchestra. So obviously nobody volunteered. Said, Carlo, you. Okay, I go out. And I start to conduct. It's very simple. 4/4, celli divisi, nothing special. So I start 1, tirara. No, he stops me. Okay, say, okay, try again. Va bene, do the same thing. Tara. No. And at the point I thought, what? I say, well, what is wrong? I said. And then he started to say, who is playing? I said, well, are the violoncelli divisi in 3? Okay, conduct now. And I thought, the violoncelli are at the right of the orchestra, so I have to turn to the right. Sorry. So I started that. No. Oh my God, again. So he's asked, who is singing? Well, Radames, Ramfis first and Radames, etc., etc. Please conduct. No, again. Anyway, he went on for about 40 minutes like this. And then slowly he let out what he wanted. He wanted, I was just conducting technically.
Yes.
He wanted that already from the first one, there was the feeling of this dark sound of the celli divisi, of the fact that Radames, the Ramfis is the Grand Sacerdote, is the high priest, and have this power over. So basically what he wanted to express was not that it is in 4/4, but all the drama that was in the score. And this is something that I actually have not been told, during my years at the Conservatorio. And for me, it was a big surprise, shock.
Yes.
Apart from the shock of being out there for 40 minutes, being stopped every 2 seconds. But that was something that I always bring with me because it was right. And this is what actually conducting is. So that was the first thing. It's actually interesting because from the point of view of the technique, the actual technique, it was not bothered so much, but he really was absolutely ferocious if people were just, going along, just moving the hands, and that for me was a big lesson. And that after this, then I did what a lot of conductors were doing at the time, to go to Siena, to the Accademia Chigiana, and Franco Ferrara, the famous Franco Ferrara, was teaching then. And, I thought, yeah, fine, let's go. I will never be taken in. But I was, actually. Yeah. I was that year, actually, the only Italian. And again, was the same kind of experience. Ferrara, everybody says that Ferrara was a great teacher. Depends what you mean, because Ferrara was not teaching in the normal way for the very simple reason that he had all these qualities from day one of his life. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. I had the luck to see him conduct for 5 minutes. And, there was a sort of stories of urban legends. When Ferrara conducts, the sound of the orchestra changes. Of course, Ferrara can know everything from memory. This, that. And I was relatively skeptical about all this. But actually, I experimented with my own eyes because there was a colleague in the course that was conducting, and it was not great. And Ferrara, at a certain point, without saying a word, just standing on his feet, I went behind him. This guy didn't even notice that he was there, and Ferrara started to conduct from behind him. And then the guy noticed that something was different because the orchestra was doing other things. So it sort of went away, and Ferrara remained there conducting. And yeah. And in these 5 minutes, really, I understood what conducting is.
What a difference.
I cannot express it, with words, but it was there. It was just impossible, absolutely impossible not to know what to do with this hand. By the way, he was half paralyzed, so he was conducting with his left because he had a stroke with his right. It didn't make any difference. He was conducting, actually, this is a funny story, with he had a brush, a painting brush rather than a conducting baton, very short, taken on the other side. It was holding the brush by the
bristles.
By the brush, it will bristle. But it was I do remember it was the Hebrides of Mendelssohn, the overture, and when he finished with this pianissimo, with this flute going up, and then there are the two pizzicati of the strings that, as you know, for experience, pizzicati are complicated to do.
Yeah.
There was no way that anybody could go wrong with that. Even a blind person could have gone down with his beat. And this is not just technique. This is come with me and do this, because this is the way to do it. And this, for me, this has been my two really big experience that I had in my life, Vladimir Derman and Franco Ferrara, that form what I believe, conducting is.
Yeah.
But was after the Conservatorio.
At this point, you've spoken almost exclusively about opera. Obviously, being an Italian, that's important. And if you look at your career, you've obviously most of the jobs that you've had, including Welsh National Opera, which we'll come to later, have been in opera. Were you also doing symphonic work around this time, or was because you'd gone through La Scala and been a repetiteur, and then where you were, was opera the main thing at this point in your career?
Personally, I was doing more concert than opera at the time,
yeah.
And even now, over the years, I've always done a lot of concert. The point is that, as you say, holding a position as music director of an opera company, obviously goes in that direction.
Yes.
But I think that both, for me, I really enjoy both, and I think that for me, both parts are important to different phases of the same art of conducting.
Well, I mean, before we go on to opera, this was a question I was going to ask later, but I may as well ask it now because we're in this topic. For you, in a perfect year, pre-COVID or post-COVID, imagine, in a perfect year, what percentage of the time would you hope to be doing opera, and what percentage of the time would you hope to be doing non-opera symphonic work?
Well, you see, I would actually change the question. Not what percentage of the time, because obviously when you do to go a symphonic concert, in 1 week is done and dusted.
Yes.
When you do an opera, in 1 week you have not even started. In a way.
No, exactly. Yeah.
So I would say, actually, I think that in a year I do, as a number of projects, more concerts than operas.
Yes.
But of course, in terms of time, you're right. Maybe I don't know, let's say 2 months of concert and 9 months of opera. But it's not because there are many, many more operas. It's just because it's a different timing that you need to set apart.
Yeah, obviously, when you work in opera, the lead-in time, the amount of rehearsal time that you have going from early piano rehearsals and then rehearsals with the director, and then cast rehearsals and then Sitzprobe and into performances takes an awful lot longer than, as you say, a week's symphonic work. It can be done in 3 days.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, it doesn't mean that the study time to learn a symphonic concert is, it's still a long time for 3 days work. Whereas,
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
from the point of view, is also a different way of studying because obviously there are certain things when you study a symphonic score, is just you and the score. When you study an opera, yeah, obviously there is you and the score, but there are so many different variables, even during the study time, about you can have your idea of how doing things, but then of course you have to think which kind of singer you have for the role. If he's a heavy singer with a heavy voice or a singer with a lighter voice, I think it would be counterproductive to just use one size fits all in the way that you study, because I mean, you're not going to drive a Cinquecento in the same way that you drive a Porsche. Is different ways. And so even already when I'm studying an opera, I always think about the voices that I have to work with, and this is something that you don't necessarily do when you study a symphonic score. So it's a different it's a different way of studying, but obviously it takes a lot of time for both, and sometimes there are some incredibly intricate symphonic scores. I mean, but for example, just to mention, one symphonic score and an opera, Stravinsky. When I conduct the Rite of Springs, obviously the kind of work that you put in, as you know, is really very, very serious. And when I done of Stravinsky, actually the Reichsprogress, I found it much, much clearer, much easier. Of course, it's a different kind of Stravinsky, it's much more neoclassical. But so it depends also sometimes from the kind of piece that you're studying. But obviously, the first thing is that you have to study it. I mean, it's never a good idea to go on the podium without knowing the score.
It's a terrible idea. One of my last questions at the end is about score study, so I'll leave it where it normally sits in the podcast and go to 1985, which is when you win the Toscanini Conductors competition. Can you remember what the format was, how many rounds you had to do? And after winning that competition, how was life for you? Did it make a sudden difference to your career? Did you, in modern day competitions, often the prize is sort of 30 concerts with 30 different orchestras and a cash prize. What was the prize then, and how did it impact your life?
Well, that competition was actually a very particular competition because it was based on the 6 symphonies of Tchaikovsky.
Oh, okay.
And Falstaff. So what we did at the beginning of the competition, it was it went on for about 1 month and a half. Because at the beginning there was a big selection, first on titles, piece of paper, recording, whatever. And then from that, there has been about, I would say, 20, 25, maybe 30 that have been chosen to do, no, actually more, must have been around 14, 50, to do the usual 7 minutes with the orchestra.
Yeah.
And from that, we went down to about 7, 6, 7, 8, I don't remember. At that point, we had 1 month, 1 month and a half to prepare to perform both the symphonies and to study and Falstaff with actually this Vladimir Delman that I was telling you. And at the end of this, there was the competition. Each one of us, actually 3 people has been chosen, so there must have been now another level, let's say, because at the end, 3 people has been chosen, each one conducting 1 act of Falstaff and 1 symphony of Tchaikovsky.
And did you know which Tchaikovsky symphony, or was that sprung on you as a surprise?
No, it was a surprise, and we need to know to know all Falstaff and all the six symphonies of Tchaikovsky. I mean, it didn't happen 5 minutes before. It happened like, I don't know, 1 week, 5 days, something like that. It was actually very interesting because allowed us, the competitors, and also the orchestra, really to know each other and to work with it rather than just going there, boom, goodbye, as very often happen in competition. About the second part of your question, what did change in your life? I actually, yes, from that moment, I started to work really professionally, because before I was conducting, but was also teaching piano. And from that moment, I finished. At the time, my career was only in Italy. I've never been to conduct elsewhere else. Well, if you exclude, I arrived second in the competition in Besançon 2 years before. So technically that is France. So, and so it started actually with a lot of concerts, with a medium-sized orchestra, and then some operas. And then what happened actually? Well, it was the beginning of my international career. That was in the UK, and this was a couple of years later, maybe 3 years later, in '88 at the Buxton Festival.
Yes.
And actually, this is a very interesting story. I was conducting in Palermo like 1 year before, 2 years before. I don't remember even what I was conducting. But I do remember that the repetiteur in Palermo was actually a British lady. And she told me one day, today is coming a friend of mine, a soprano, British soprano, because we are rehearsing for a concert. So this person, the soprano, came to the performance, and we met, ciao, how are you, blah, blah. End of that. Then, 1 year later, the telephone rings, and is this agent, British agent, saying, hi, I'm a British agent. I would like to know if you are free to conduct in Buxton. There's not a lot of money, but it's a good experience, etc., etc. At the time, I thought, fine, I will accept, I will do it. My first experience outside Italy, a little bit frightening because I had not studied English at school. I studied German.
Yeah.
So my English was seriously limited. But I went there. It was a great experience. The orchestra was the Manchester Camerata. We clicked immediately, and it was a great success. On the back of that, the first night there was Paul Findlay, that was the opera director at the Covent Garden at the time, and he invited me at Covent Garden. So, it was not bad after one performance.
No, it's good.
He invited Covent Garden. But then I do remember asking my agent, I said, look, I never know. You just called me and asked me if I wanted, but how have you heard of me? Because, and he said, well, I represent this soprano.
Yes.
And she told me that she saw you, and she told me that you're very good, and they trusted their judgment.
Great.
And so this is how it started. And oh God, should I say the name of the soprano? Yes, let's say the name of the soprano.
Yeah.
Leslie Garrett.
Ah, yes, yeah.
So I basically owe the beginning of my international career to Leslie Garrett.
Well, how nice, and well done, Leslie. Don't you think often, though, that's the best way of getting work is when it's done on word of mouth, when a player, maybe guesting in an orchestra or conducting, goes back to their home orchestra and says, hey, I worked last week with, this orchestra, and the guy conducting was superb. And then so, you're then booked to go to his own home orchestra. When it's done like that, rather than sort of the classic way of agents ringing people up and saying, hey, I've got this conductor, he's really, really good. When it comes from players or from singers like Leslie Garrett, it means a little bit more, and I think managers are more willing to take a risk when they've got personal recommendations.
But you are absolutely right, because I remember when I was music director of Welsh National Opera. Of course, I received a lot of faxes, emails, CDs from many agents about many singers. And very often you don't take that into consideration, and not because, we are particularly mean, because if you follow up every person that writes, is not enough a lifetime.
No.
So obviously, then, as you rightly say, if you meet a person that you trust from the music point of view, and this person say, hey, I heard X, just go to listen, it's really great.
Yeah.
Obviously, you trust them more. And I think, actually, that the importance, personally, of an agent, a good agent, is not the one that sort of sells everybody in the same way, but that actually know and get a reputation of being able to be trusted, because there are certain agents that that they actually do understand.
Yes.
There are certain that that are on the booking agency, and there is a big difference. But definitely, I trust. I have people that I trust musically, and if they tell me this person is good, I trust them much more than any 3 pages curriculum that they have done everything under the sun.
Well, you just mentioned the big job in your career when you look on Wikipedia or on your own website is music director of Welsh National Opera. You 2 stints as music director, 92 to 2001, and then 2004 to 2008. And since 2015, you're conductor laureate. You've just given us a snapshot of what it's like to be the music director of an opera company with, endless CVs, CDs, faxes, phone calls, letters, book my singer, book my conductor. What's it like running an opera company like that? How involved do you get in every year's repertoire, in choosing who conducts when you're not conducting? What's the role?
It's a very complicated question, because
Sorry.
different. No, but it's a very, very interesting and good question, because many conductors take the same role in different ways. There's not right or wrong ways, but I'm talking for myself. When I became music director in Welsh National Opera, the first thing that I wanted to do was to take the job seriously. Now, for me, taking the job seriously is not only somebody that conducts more than the others. That comes with the job. But was actually to take the responsibility and the guidance of the musical part of Welsh National Opera in that case. I've not said anything new here, but the thing was that because of the way that Welsh National Opera was working, with at the time 3 sort of mini season every year, I immediately understood that was not possible. The presence to make a mark, an impact in Welsh National Opera was not like another orchestra or another opera theater. I needed much more time, because, just follow me a second here. If you, rehearse from September to middle of October, and you rehearse 2 operas, they do 3 operas, no? You rehearse 1 or 2, and then from middle October to December, you have to do the performances. This was the way of working with WNO, because it's a touring company. That means that basically you have been there for 3 months. Now, 3 months, 4 months is what a music director does generally in an orchestra or in another theater. But there, it was not enough, because if you do only this, that means that you basically are working with the orchestra, with the chorus, only once a year.
Yes.
Because now, while with an opera that has more of a repertoire, obviously with the same amount of time you would have worked more pieces.
Yes.
And as you know very well, the real work of the music director, of the conductor, is during the rehearsals, not so much during the performances. And so that meant for me that I had to take the decision to give a lot of time on the year on Welsh National Opera. And it meant also for me the decision of going to live in Wales.
Yes.
Because of this. So this was the first thing that has been in a way defining my life, not only in musical terms but also in personal terms, because I can tell you, moving when I was 30 or 32 from Italy to Wales, it was a little bit of a cultural difference, let's say.
Yes.
Apart from the food, the climate, the weather, that's another story. So
You even learnt the language, didn't you?
yeah, that happened later
Right.
also because then I started a relationship in Wales and had children, and my children are half Welsh,
Yeah.
half Italian, and I thought it was important to believe in what Wales was proposing, and
Yes.
part of that is also the language. That is actually beautiful language. And then I think that what happened then, the real big moment has been when Anthony Freud became general director. And from there, we had quite a lot of years that were actually great because, you see, it's always difficult. You cannot, direct the theater just single-handed. It's too big. It's too big a job. Is impossible. So what worked well between Anthony and me was the fact that to each other respected the area of the other person,
Yes.
and this is always the best the best recipe, because that means one, that the area, whichever area is covered. Second, that there are not problems and conflicts. So that were really great moment, and there have been great shows, and slowly, also the music level of the company, went up, because you need to work at this. You know, raising a level of an orchestra is not a job of 5 minutes.
No,
It's a
definitely
long
not.
job because is a very long and complicated, also psychologically, because it's almost impalpable. It's not possible to define the work. It just happened day after day, rehearsal after rehearsal, when suddenly, you discover that after rehearsing a lot, a certain blend happens naturally in a certain part of the orchestra. That when you give a certain kind of beat, the answer of all the orchestra is the same. And then at the point, everybody's talking the same language. But again, it's very long. So they were really very interesting, exciting, and in a way also formative years for me. And about choosing the singer, choosing directors, choosing conductors, I always started to from the point of view that if the theater thrives, I, as a music director, I gain personally. I never been a person that said, I don't want this conductor because it's actually too good. I know that many conductors do this. I was not that kind of person, and I think that is the right attitude that you need to do if you really want to do the good of the theater.
Yeah.
About director, obviously, is more complicated, because there you need to have a vision of what you want in terms of the way that you present the operas to the public, and at that point is really a minefield, because you can start to think, okay, this director is too innovative, so I don't want it. This other director, is very safe. Yes, thank you very much, but then it's boring. So there are many things. But, for example, one big thing, talking actually also about conductors, we had a production of Ansel and Gretel with Richard Jones and a very young Jurowski, that and that was a great success, and there were two great artists that really were working there at WNO, and that helped WNO. You need good artists, you need good people, and then singers is the same thing. Also, there was a difference with Welsh National Opera compared to other theaters. The budget of British Opera Company, as you know, is less than extends. Say,
Yes.
there's not,
Yeah.
and so there was always an eye on the fees level, and this is why it was a lot of work trying to find new artists,
Yes.
promising artists, but also this, we did. And then, of course, there is the other one that I really hated, but is necessary. The music director very often have to say no for many reasons. No, this is wrong. No, this is not allowed. No, I cannot give you the day off because you want to go to the marriage of the daughter of the baker on the corner. I'm joking here, of course, but
it's part of your job,
but it's
having
part
to
of the
say
job.
yeah.
Esatto. And this always happen, like in every relationship, I guess, not only in music but also in life. There is the honeymoon period, then there is always a dip, and then if you survive the dip, then it's a great relationship. And yeah, I survived the dip and became a great relationship. In fact, also the reason why I came back, that was actually interesting. I came back because, well, unfortunately, it didn't work out with my successor of the first time. But also, already in the first years, when I came back, I had already a few contracts as what would have been guest artist at the time.
Yes.
And this actually allowed me to do one thing that I really wanted to do. That was to open the new Millennium Center. Because in my first period, I spent a lot of time, pushing for this. I mean, obviously, I was not the only one. Anthony did a lot. There were, the person that now is my wife, that was the director of development at the time. She did a lot. A lot of people were working very hard, and then I don't know if you remember, that was this scheme, that there was this competition that has been made for architectural competition.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I remember.
And the famous architect Zaha Hadid won it.
Yes.
And I met a few times with her team, because it was a very complicated idea that she had. Wonderful. I mean, it would have been definitely something that the world would have envied to Cardiff. It didn't happen also because there was a lot of political oppositions. Some justified, some definitely very parochial. Sorry, but this is the truth. And then when it started again, with the Opera House, so-called Millennium Center, but actually the only reason why the theater has been built, it was because Welsh National Opera was existing. I can tell you that if Welsh National Opera was not existing, the Millennium Center would have not been built. So it's better that everybody remembers this, because this is the reason why that building is there standing. So that actually coming back the second time allowed me to open it, and that was for a great satisfaction.
At this point, I asked Carlo about his role with opera rara, and specifically how the rare and neglected operas they perform are chosen, who chooses them, and how they decide who might end up singing them. If you want to hear that 10-minute discussion, I've turned it into a Patreon-exclusive bonus mini-episode. For as little as £5 a month, you can get access to this mini-episode, as well as the previous 11 mini-episodes. You will also get a monthly bulletin podcast from me about my career, as well as advance news about this podcast. You also get an interview once a month with a prominent person from the classical music world who has dealings with conductors, as well as articles, essays, and all sorts of other conducting-based content. The details of how to join are in the show notes below, and I'd love to see you subscribe to the Supporters Club of A Mic on the Podium very soon. Now, back to my chat with Carlo Rizzi. Carlo, I ask every conductor this because people ask me to, mainly conducting students and conducting geeks. When you come to learn either a new opera for opera rara or a new symphonic score or whatever score you come to learn, do you have a system of learning it? Do you go from big to small, or do you start on page one and work your way through? And when you learn a new score, are you a writer of things in your scores? Do you use coloured pencils? Do you have a system, phrase lengths, all of this sort of stuff? The answers are so different every time, fascinating, from some people who write nothing and keep their scores blank and white and virginal, to others who, it becomes like a Jackson Pollock painting. How do you go about it?
Well, actually, in this I'm a little bit Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because both work for me in different situations. I have some scores that are like the like the arcobaleno, what is called in English? I forgot now. Like a lot of colors. And I have some score that seems that they're come out from the shelf of a shop. It depends what you're looking for in the score. It depends. You see, for example, if it's a score that let's assume that I study a new opera of Verdi, something of which I know the style, something that I know how. Sorry, it's a bad phrase. Not how it goes.
Yes.
I generally don't write a lot of things because I know it, because I know what, not necessarily the score, but the way that it goes. But if there is a score, for example, when I do a new contemporary piece, then I mark the score a lot. Not because it's more difficult necessarily, but because it helps me to focus my attention on what I think is the thread, the musical thread that you need to show or to go through. And that is something that I do for myself. And for me, it's great having the iPad, because I can cancel and do it again in another way. If when I was doing this with paper and pencil, I had a masses on the arm that was like an enormous bicep with all the canceling, the erasing.
Yes, rubbing out.
Yeah. Now you can just do it on the iPad. But it's and sometimes it depends. That there is something that I don't know if it happens to you too, but there are some points that I actually sort of not forget. I know that they are coming, but they come in a very quirky way. And then this is when I really start with big eyes and arrows and stop and all different colors like a rainbow.
And I write in red think ! Quite often on my scores, because you can get carried away in a performance, but now and again you really do have to think what's coming over the page. There's a big tempo change. You might even have to think of a mathematical formula of going from one tempo to another, and I just write in big red letters "think" across my score.
One that I use quite often is calma, calma, because sometimes you get too much excited when there is, I don't know, an accelerando or something, and then you discover there are another 5 pages of that. So if you do everything, so calma.
Yeah, keep calm. Yeah, I've got a few of those as well.
Exactly. So this is the different way that I work, and it depends from the piece, basically.
Carlo, it is time for the 10 questions that every conductor loves to answer. And I start with the first 2. What sound or noise do you love, and what sound or noise do you hate?
Dunque, the sound or noise that I love, well, obviously I'm not going to say that I love music because musical sound, because that will be obvious. I like very much the sound of silence in nature. I am lucky, even now I am talking to you from my house in Italy, is in the Umbrian Hills, and is very silent, interrupt sometimes from some birds or the wind between the tree. I say this not to be incredibly sort of romantic, but for me personally, living all the time in a world that is made of, let's call it noise, the fact of being able to have some silence and to hear the inner sound that I want to think of is fantastic. And actually, personally, just having seen last night the last David Attenborough documentary, on Netflix about what the world is becoming, I think that just really pausing and have a silence and hearing nature part of our life of this planet is very important. Now, what do I hate? The sound that I hate. I hate people shouting. I hate, although sometimes I do shout myself. I hate music in the restaurants.
Oh, don't we all? Yeah.
That is something that should be a petition, a bill to the parliament to stop it. It's impossible. I mean, for us musicians, definitely, this is sort of professional deformation. We cannot just be there and not think about what is going on. Oh, there's a C major, 4/4, going to this, going to that. So that is already something that makes me not enjoy the meal. But I don't know how people do it. If you go out, with your partner or on a date or with a friend, you have to sign language sometimes because you cannot. So that really, really, really I hate.
If you had 24 hours free, what would you spend it doing?
Well, generally I try to read. I like to read because I remember I was an avid reader when I was at school, and then I started to read much less because I didn't have the time. So I really like to read. If I would have been here, I would have loved to have some walks. Definitely. We are not talking anything very energetic. I mean, I'm not a marathon runner. Maybe that is something that I will take up in my 70s. But and one thing that I actually like is to do woodworking, to work with wood. One of my grandfathers was actually a carpenter, and I always admire, what he was doing for us, small things. And I like to, to go into. I have a little workshop here in Italy to do these things. I always put the earplugs, actually the earplugs, and then the big earplugs on the so that when I work with like the saw, I don't hear the noise. But I like to work with wood because it requires precision, it requires patience, and requires also artistry.
Who would be a favorite conductor of Yesteryear?
Well, conductor of yesterday, do we mean conductors that are dead? or
dead or retired. So not many conductors retire. So you're basically
no,
yes.
exactly.
I can think of one pretty famous one who's just retired, but other than that, yeah, they're basically of days gone by. So dead and back through history.
I have been sometime. I feel that I'm born in 1960, and I just missed a little bit of the time for the great what they call the great conductors, Klemperer, or vabbè, Toscanini was already dead, but also the Gui, the Sabata. I never see Bernstein, unfortunately, live, but I had the luck to see quite a lot of Carlos Kleiber.
Ah, yes.
And that for me is the person is the conductor that I rate more than most. I have been lucky to see live performances. I have been lucky to see actually rehearsals.
Wow, that's rare.
Well, yes, this didn't happen officially. It happened because I sort of sneaked in a sort of marine-like, on the floor, tried to get only the eyes above the parapet of the chair, because if he was seeing somebody, he was stopping conducting.
Yeah, you would. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that for me was that was a genius. It was a great conductor, fantastic conductor. That has been my huge experience, really.
Going on, and some conductors find this very, very difficult, and sometimes they choose to be repertoire specific. Who you think is the best conductor, or a favorite conductor at period instrument or whatever. Excuse me. Who would be a favorite current conductor?
Well, this question, as I say, is very complicated because it's very difficult also because in a way with conductors that are alive and performing, you always as a conductor measure yourself to them, and so there are ways that they do something that maybe you don't like, you would do differently. That doesn't mean that they're not great conductors. So this is a very difficult question to answer. I don't know what to say about this. I actually have a great admiration for Philippe Jordan, very much, and also Nezatz again. I really like his way of conducting. Is what I like in conductors, because now I'm 60, so obviously possibly there are more younger conductors than older conductors than me, unfortunately. I like to see in a younger conductor that passion, that fire, not necessarily the technical whiz kid. That is great, yeah, that's fine. And obviously, sometimes they lack the experience, if you want. But I like when the people, they really sort of throw themselves head first into the music, and with that enthusiasm that is the fire that you have to have when you start the profession. So that is what I like.
What is the hardest work you have ever conducted?
Well, there are different ways of hard. Let me tell you technically what was the hardest work that I did. It was to conduct in Bregenz. It was not particularly about, well, I was conducting Aida, but it was the situation that was very difficult. In Bregenz, Bregenz is an open-air theater.
Yes.
Is on the lake. So there are 7,000 people, then there is some water, then there is the stage. Where is the orchestra? The orchestra is in a building nearby. Where is the chorus? The chorus is in the same building, but in another room nearby. And in my case, given that I was doing Aida, where is the offstage band? Well, guess what? It's in the same building, in another room again.
Oh my God.
The singers are on stage, and on stage there is also a non-mic'd sort of acting chorus. Now, from what I just said, you can imagine what what the difficult technically must have been.
Oh
When I
God.
conduct, I mean, thank God, I knew Aida from memory, so I did it without the score,
Mm.
because I had in front of me 4 different monitors.
Yes.
Behind me, I had 2 loudspeakers that were giving me the sound of the singers, because the singer was outside, and the singer saw me all outside, in big monitors outside. So did the chorus in the other room and the band in the other room again. Technically, it was really a challenge.
Mm.
The
Mm.
system was actually very good, but as you know, there is some delay that
Yeah.
cannot be eliminated. It just cannot be eliminated. So to be able to compensate with this was a real challenge, technical challenge. And I actually liked it.
Well,
Honestly.
I've conducted 2 operas. Both times, the singers were behind me,
Oh
or
yeah.
throughout the entire. No, not behind me. Behind me, they were actually physically
No, no,
behind
no,
me.
I know,
Yeah,
behind.
yeah,
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 yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And they were watching me only on monitors. And both times the orchestra, I was stood. We were in the same room, at least,
Yeah,
but to learn to conduct to a monitor and to give somebody cues down a monitor, and when they're running slightly behind the actual orchestra, or they're rushing slightly, and you're having to look at it in a camera and go, for God's sake, stop rushing, or please sing faster. Yeah, I found that quite difficult to get used to both times I did it. But as you said, when you get it right, the challenge, you think, oh yeah,
yeah,
we really nailed that. That was wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah.
But from then another opera that I would like, another piece that I would like to mention about being the hardest was actually Tristan and Isolde,
Mm.
because that just for the stamina, that you needed, um, because as you know, there are basically 3 acts of 1 hour 20 each,
Yes.
and they so. It's not music that you just do la la la. It's music
No,
that you
no.
prepare as something. And I was absolutely um, really tired, very tired at the end, And thank God they finished with the Liebestod. That is a fantastic piece.
Yes.
But that for me was the most difficult, also from the emotional point of view, because of the story, because it's really, it wipes you out.
Mm.
So I would say from the technical point of view was this experience in Bregenz, and from the more emotional point of view, Tristan and Isolde.
When traveling abroad to conduct, what item could you not leave home without?
I actually, now this sounds very silly,
I
but
like silly. Silly's good.
I always bring with me in my bag a sachet of lavender that I have harvested with my hands
Mm.
here in this place where I am. And I always with me because it reminds me of a place where where I really love to be, that is associated for me with the part of me that I like
Mm.
more relaxed, more smiling, less hectic, because I have time here, with my wife and with my family. So this is what I always bring with me. And when things get difficult, I take it out, I look at it, and I think that is very nice.
I don't think that's a silly answer. I think that's a beautiful answer. If only we could all have, something we could put in a sachet to remind us of a happy place. I think we'd all do it. But yeah, you obviously
Yeah.
have. What a wonderful answer. Thank you. Um, Number 8. What is the one thing you would change about being a conductor?
I wouldn't change a lot about being a conductor. I would change the fact that I would love to be, like, say, 10 centimeters taller. This, I really would love this because, um, yeah, I mean, I'm not very short, but no, I'm not the tallest of people. And I think that being 10 centimeters taller will give me another perspective from a higher planet, let's say, from an higher planet. So, no, I mean, this is a little bit of a silly answer.
No,
But
but
about
it has a serious point in the fact that you can see a little bit further onto the stage. If you're conducting opera, you can see further to the back
absolutely.
of the stage, and people can see you from the back of the stage more. Yeah.
You are absolutely right in that. In fact, very often, exactly because of this, and also because you don't want to conduct, for 3 hours with your arm completely up, because it becomes tiring. Sometimes I ask for a higher podium, and not because I'm a megalomaniac, but because I need to be seen. So I think that will be very useful, 10 centimeters more.
Well, a little story about working with somebody I like working with very much is the violinist Chloe Hanslip. The first time we met was with the CBSO's own youth orchestra, and we hadn't met before the rehearsal, I don't think. She arrived just in time, and she walked into the rehearsal hall, and I was stood on the podium, and she was stood on the floor. And I'm about 6 feet tall, and she's about 4'11", maybe 5 foot. Chloe, if you're listening, apologies if I got it wrong. And she looked up at me, craned her neck up, and said, "Right, either you get down off that box, or somebody find me a taller box than you." And it is a serious point sometimes, with podiums and height differences, and no, it's a wonderful answer. Nobody else has given that answer. That's great. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Let's say in about 40 years, when I will retire, probably what I really would like to become very good at woodworking. Definitely really would like to do that. Another thing that I could have done if I would not been a conductor, probably I would have become an academic. Not necessarily a teacher, because to be a teacher, you need also to have social skills. They don't necessarily have a lot of social skills, but probably an academic. I would have done some research work, but that is boring. Better to become a carpenter.
Yeah, but better for your woodworking. My father, since he's retired, has taken up or gone back to woodworking, but he's taken up using a lathe to be able to make bowls and candlesticks and things like that. And he loves it. My mother says he spends hours out there. She never sees him. And he comes back smelling.
Well, that's the trick.
That's the trick. Yeah, exactly. If the world were to end tonight, what would be your choice of final meal and drink?
Now, you don't know this, but it's the truth. This morning, I just had a cooking lesson here from a local cook to learn some Umbrian dishes, because this is something that I wanted to learn. And so one thing that today I've done for the first time, and I would love it to have as my last meal, would be tiramisu. That is actually funny if you think that I never drank a coffee in my life, and the tiramisu obviously has coffee. But coffee in tiramisu is different from normal coffee. So that will be probably not the meal, but it would be the dessert. The meal is, has to be either pasta or pizza. There's no way. And the antipasto would be about 3 tons of cheese and bread. So as you can see, I'm really very diet conscious.
Obviously.
So after all, it's the last meal. Then we are all going to explode. Yeah. For what is regarding drinks, would be an alcoholic drink that we were used to drink when we were small, and I recently rediscovered, called Chinotto. I don't know if this exists in Britain. Don't think so. But basically, Chinotto is a slightly bitter citrus fruit. It's a fruit that grows in Sicily, for example, and they make this drink. So that would be for the non-alcoholic part of it. For the alcoholic drink, will be the Italian grappa. That is something that I love. Some people say that is how you say, an acquired taste. My wife hates it. Well, her loss. But it would be grappa. So there we are.
That sounds like a wonderful way to go out. I think my father would love the cheese course. I'd definitely eat the pasta and pizza course. And my youngest daughter is a tiramisu fanatic. She
There we
absolutely
are.
loves tiramisu. So, yeah, very, very, very good choice. Carlo, it's been a wonderful hour chatting to you. And I hope after all of this, we get to meet and we could maybe meet over a chinotto or a glass of grappa.
Assolutamente. Thank you very much to you. It's been great talking to you.
A Mic on the Podium was devised and produced by Michael Seal, with music by Ben Dawson. Next time, I chat to an American conductor who won the Malco conducting competition in 2009. He is the music director of the Phoenix Orchestra of Boston and is just coming to the end of his time as artistic director of the Lausanne Chamber Orchestra. He guest conducts all across the world, whilst finding time to write and host one of the most successful classical music podcasts. But until then, bye-bye.